and welcome to another WSIB Truth Matters with Joe Machado on this beautiful Friday afternoon. Happy Friday. The weekend is just around the corner. I'm sure a lot of you are looking forward to the weekend, as I am as well. It's supposed to be nice weather, and I'm looking forward to a little bit of golf and barbecuing, cocktails, you know, the usual. And I hope that you're planning some exciting events for yourself and your family for this weekend. Anyway, so today I'm going to talk about a source of ongoing confusion and controversy, which is the WSIB's policy on pre-existing conditions. When I say controversy, is that although the WSIB has arbitrarily applied this policy in many instances, it was finally it was challenged in court, not at the Workplace Safety and Insurance Appeals Tribunal, in court, the Ontario Provincial Court, and because it was said that they were applying a hidden policy that had been done behind closed doors. Nobody knew about it. Can't say that I'm surprised. And so there were some inconsistencies in how they were applying the policy, which prompted a class action lawsuit. The court at first dismissed the class action lawsuit. On appeal, it was approved to move ahead. The judge certified the class action, and shortly thereafter the WSIB reversed and did a bit of a backdancing to rectify what they had done, which was illegal, even though they still say it wasn't. It's okay, because there have been other recent instances of the WSIB being challenged in court, and of course most of you know that we are also in the process of preparing for a class action lawsuit. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the video. But anyway, so this policy, it is confusing, very confusing. And over the past 30 plus years dealing with WSIB and clients and all that, with my paralegal firm, yeah, it can be confusing if you're not really directly involved with it and take the time to understand some of the nuances of the policy. So I'm gonna do my best to explain to you what the policy is all about and how it may or may not impact your claim. And this policy applies to pretty much all claims. So it's not exclusive to pre-1990 claims or Bill 162 claims or Bill 99 claims. So if you're watching this video and your case may have, or there may be an issue of pre-existing condition in your case, then I would suggest that you watch to the end if you want to have an understanding of the policy and how it works. Again, this is based on all of my experience of over 30 years of dealing with the WSIB exclusively, appeals, Workplace Safety and Insurance Appeals Tribunal, and having handled thousands of cases. So here's the policy. So the policy is, and I'm going to put it up on the screen here, it's policy 150203. And I'm going to read the one section of the policy to you, and I'm also going to put that on the screen. And basically it states, entitlement for a work-related injury or disease will not be denied due to the existence of a pre-existing condition. Once initial entitlement is established, the decision maker, so your case manager, considers the impact, if any, of a pre-existing condition on your work, on your ongoing impairment from your accident. So really, at the end of the day, even if you do have a pre-existing condition, and you may or may not know that, and I'll explain that to you, it doesn't negate entitlement in your claim under the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act. What is a pre-existing condition according to the WSIB in their policy? So basically, they're conditions that have produced periods of impairment or disease requiring health care and that have caused a disruption in your employment prior to your workplace injury or disease. So in other words, something totally unrelated to your workplace injury or disease that caused periods of impairment requiring treatment before your accident. The other one is underlying or asymptomatic conditions which only became manifest post-accident. One of the best examples is degenerative disc disease. And just this week, I had some emailing with one of our WSIB settlement.com members about something specific to degenerative disc disease. He had no idea that he had degenerative disc disease. Well, the bottom line is most of us don't. And most of us can go a lifetime without ever having any issues with respect to degenerative disc disease. So degenerative disc disease can oftentimes be referred to degeneration in your neck or your cervical spine or your lumbar spine that happens, the doctors call it wear and tear. That happens due to aging and over time. And of course, depending on the kind of work or activities that you do, it can be sports, it can be a construction, a heavy labor-intensive job, or working on an assembly line. So some of these activities can cause degenerative disc disease, but again, you can go a lifetime without having any complications whatsoever as a result of that. However, in some cases, a work injury can cause a previously asymptomatic, which means that you were having no symptoms whatsoever, can cause a previously asymptomatic condition to develop or to surface. And so that's what they're referring to when they're talking about underlying or asymptomatic conditions. And then the third one that they talk about here is work-related permanent impairments for which the WSIB has granted a permanent disability or an uneconomic loss benefit. So what that means is, and I had many situations like this, is if you have a previous injury, let's say to your lower back, and you were awarded a pension under a pre-1990 claim or an L award in a previous Bill 162 or Bill 99 claim for which you received a pension or an L award, that's considered a pre-existing condition, but it doesn't negate your workplace accident. So whatever impact that pre-existing condition or the pre-existing conditions I just mentioned can have on your current claim is determined by other sections of the policy, and I'm going to explain those too as well. So how does a pre-existing condition affect your claim? So it doesn't necessarily mean that that it is cause to determine that your work-related impairment no longer exists. So just because you have a pre-existing condition doesn't mean that your current condition and the impairment resulting from your current condition is eliminated. That does not give the board the authority to deny your claim or to shorten the length of your claim. When it is evident or becomes evident, the work-relatedness of the ongoing impairment is monitored by your case manager. So, for example, if you had an X-ray and you went for X-rays or an MRI and it showed that you had degenerative disc disease, which would be considered a pre-existing condition, and that information is revealed to the WSIB, then what they do is they monitor the situation to determine to what extent it is impacting on your existing impairment from your existing injury. Whether it's prolonging the recovery of that impairment, whether it's causing more restrictions as a result of the pre-existing condition. I'm also going to talk about those because they're covered in the policy. But that's what happens when it becomes evident to the WSIB. So they may send you a letter and say, listen, we're not really accepting this now because it's a pre-existing condition. we need to do further investigation. That's because they received some kind of a report that showed that there was some degenerative disc disease. Whether it's they're being accurate or not, I'm not going to argue that here, but that's how they view it and what they look at. So don't get alarmed if you receive a letter like that, because there's some more investigation to be conducted. And the implications of that pre-existing condition have not yet been determined. If it's not impacting your impairment, your benefits will not be affected. So that's what they look at. And if it's impacting your impairment, benefits generally continue as long as your work-related injury or disease continues to significantly contribute to your impairment. So in other words, there's a pre-existing condition, it's having some impact on your impairment, but if your impairment from your current injury or disease is the significant contributor to your impairment, then benefits will continue uninterrupted. Excuse me. So how do they look at that then when they're determining the work-relatedness of your impairment? So you would think to yourself, well, what do you mean? I had an injury, I had a cervical strain. I mean, it's obvious, it's work-related. That's correct. But they do have to continue to monitor and look at information to determine whether or not that work-relatedness of your impairment was minor or is being prolonged because of this pre-existing condition. So they look at it, for example, if it affects the same body part as your pre-existing condition. If it continues beyond the usual healing time for the type of injury that you suffered currently. So if the injury you suffered currently, you received some physiotherapy, and after that and some rest, that type of injury should have healed, but it hasn't, then they would look at it as your pre-existing condition is prolonging the effect of your current injury. The impairment is unexpectedly severe given the work-related accident. So you had a work-related accident that would yield a certain level of restrictions or pain, but it's much more significant than that typical type of injury. They also look at that when looking at the work-relatedness of your work injury or your ongoing impairment, and the change in your ability to perform your pre-accident job beyond what was expected given your work-related injury or disease. So if your inability to go back to your pre-accident job, once it's been determined that you should be able to go back to your pre-accident job, given the impairment of your recent injury, then they will look at how your pre-existing condition has impacted that. Now, these sections I'm reading right from the policy because I want to be able to give you a good understanding of not only how they look at these things, but how they make decisions when they're looking at a pre-existing condition in relationship to a current injury. So when assessing the impact of a pre-existing condition on the worker's ongoing impairment, the decision maker determines whether the work-related injury continues to be a significant contributing factor. And to make the determination, the decision maker considers the significance of the work-related injury or disease and the pre-existing condition relative to each other. So if your current injury produced a particular injury or disease and you have a pre-existing condition, they look at each one in terms of the significance of those conditions and then how they relate to each other in your overall ability or their recognition of an ongoing impairment. So essentially, if your injury or your impairment from your current injury is significantly less than the impairment produced from a pre-existing condition, They look at that in terms of assessing how much of your pre-existing condition has impacted your ongoing impairment. The next one is, in some cases, the clinical evidence may demonstrate that the significance of the pre-existing condition is so great that it overwhelmed the impact of the work-related injury, rendering it insignificant. When this occurs, the work-related injury or disease cannot be considered to be of sufficient significance in comparison to the pre-existing condition for benefits to continue. So at that point, they may say, well, listen, it's your pre-existing condition that's keeping you from being able to resume your employment because this condition that resulted from your current injury has significantly improved. That may be cause to reduce or stop your benefits. Again, I'm not going to make a judgment on that. And as you know, it's all subject to appeal, and you don't have to accept anything they say because oftentimes it really goes against what your own doctors are saying and what your own physical abilities are. But again, this is how they look at it. Then to determine if a pre-existing condition has overwhelmed the work-related injury or disease, decision makers consider whether the worker's current level of impairment would continue despite the work-related injury or disease, and whether the work-related injury or disease on its own would cause a similar level of impairment. If the work-related injury is causing a similar level of impairment, then it is still considered a significant cause of ongoing impairment. And in that case, they can't reduce or stop your benefits. So if they look at the two and your current impairment from your current accident is significant or equal in terms of how debilitating it is, they can't stop your benefits because the current impairment is still considered significant. If the pre-existing condition has overwhelmed the work-related injury or disease and the pre-existing condition resulted from a prior work-related accident, the decision maker considers whether it's been a recurrence. And yes, this is something that you see often where you've had a permanent impairment for a previous injury, and you return to your pre-injury job, or you went to some other job with your employer or a different employer, and you have another accident. They look at whether that accident is a recurrence of your pre-existing condition. Again, this has to be the same body area, or whether or not it's a new accident. And then finally, where the clinical evidence demonstrates that a pre-existing condition has been aggravated as a result of a work-related injury or disease, benefits continue until the worker recovers from the aggravation of the pre-existing condition. So, if your pre-existing condition has now returned to where it was pre-accident, yes, then that aggravation ceases. However, the WSIB can have you assessed if at some point it's determined that there was a permanent aggravation of that pre-existing condition. So in other words, if you had a pre-existing condition for your low back and it had been asymptomatic, or it was symptomatic as a result of a previous claim, and that pre-existing condition is now become permanent as a result of this accident, then the WSIB has to assess you for a non-economic loss for that condition. So having a previous back condition doesn't negate a permanent impairment if a condition has been aggravated on a permanent basis. So here you have it. If I went a little too fast for you, it's Friday, and I know everybody's in a hurry to get out. You're probably not going to want to watch this one for too long unless it's really something that matters to you. But then again, you can always review or rewind and go back to some of these sections. The policy number's on there, so you can actually check the policy on the WSIB. And if you have any questions, you can just email me directly at joemachado@wsibsettlements.com. Or you can visit wsibsettlements.com and look at the programs that are there, the support, the tools that are there to help you manage your WSIB claim. It's amazing. We just made two amazing additions to our app, 2 new features that are awesome. And so I urge you to go on WSIBsettlements.com and have a look at that, regardless. And so anyway, friends, just want a little shout out about the class action lawsuit that we are working on. So if you receive a future economic loss award for a claim, or you receive a partial loss of earnings benefit for a claim, and both of those benefits were calculated and determined by the WSIB based on deemed earnings, and you continue at a wage loss as a result of that, I suggest that you visit WSIBsettlements.com. I'll put the link here in the description or on the screen to have a look at what we're doing in terms of our class action lawsuit. The information that's there, anything that you register for, is highly confidential, will not be shared with anyone, not even those who have already registered for the class action lawsuit. It's not necessarily to do that until we've actually determined to move ahead with it. And then at that point, each of the participants will be asked if they want to continue to move ahead. But I highly suggest that you visit WSIBsettlements.com to have a look at that. And if you know anyone, a friend or a member of your family, where this applies, and I'm going to put that also on the screen here, where their future economic loss benefit under Bill 162 or their loss of earnings benefit under Bill 99 have been affected, and they're suffering a wage loss as a result of it having been deemed, or the WSIB using their deeming policy. We believe that to be illegal, and we intend to prove that in the Ontario Superior Court. As always, my friends, I always ask that you subscribe to my channel. If you're not already a subscriber, it's free to become a subscriber. Nobody's going to ask you for money. Not only do you get notified every time I post a video, I think I'm up to 57 videos now in about 3 months, and I've got 2 years worth of videos to put out, over 30 years worth of experience in this field. And I want to share all of that with you to help you manage your claim and to deal with your very real issues you have with the WSIB. And please share my videos with others who you believe could benefit from this content as well. There's a lot of people out there that don't know where to go to get information, to be able to advocate for themselves or fight for their rights. And this has been a lifeline to a lot of people since I started doing these videos. After having built the largest paralegal firm in Ontario with over 10,000 clients and thousands of, actually over 300 million in settlements for our clients. So we have things that work. I want to be able to share them. And if you like my videos, please give me a thumbs up. It's always nice to see that. Give me your comments in the video description. I like to hear your comments. I like to respond to them. And if you have something specific that you want to discuss with respect to your claim, then by all means, send me an email at joemachado@WSIBsettlements.com. I'll put it on the screen here. And I look forward to hearing from you. And friends, as always, have an amazing weekend. Take care.